They gave me 1 hour to tear down everything my uncle built. 1 hour or they drown me in lawsuits. But here's what they didn't expect. I'd triple their rent, expose their dirty deals, and have the sheriff read them their rights. In front of the entire neighborhood. I was nursing my second cup of black coffee when I first heard the tires. Not your usual pickup or old Ford like mine, but something crisp, polished, expensive, crunching across my gravel driveway like it belonged. Not here. Not on my uncle's ranch. My boots were still damp from walking fence lines that morning, and Buttercup, my best Holstein, had just calved the night before. I was exhausted, covered in hay and half-dried mud, and already running late with chores. But nothing prepared me for what was about to come out of that Range Rover. A white one, not cream, not beige, white, as if it had never seen a single speck of dirt in its entire pampered life. Its chrome gleamed like it had been waxed with $100 bills. And when the doors opened, I swear the smell of lemon-scented air conditioning hit me like a slap. Out stepped Vivian Holt, wearing designer heels that looked like they'd get fined just for being near cow manure. Behind her came Derek Simmons, her pocket-sized assistant, already dabbing his forehead like the morning breeze was a heat wave. Now, let me say this up front. I'm not part of their HOA. Never have been. Never planned to be. My uncle bought this land back in 1972 paid in cash. Built it with sweat. He died 2 years ago, left me the place in his will. And even though Pineview Heights has grown like mold on wet bread around my ranch, their property lines stop where my gate begins. At least they used to. Vivian didn't bother with pleasantries. She marched up like a general walking into a battlefield she already assumed was won. "Ethan Caldwell," she announced like I was about to be arrested. Her voice had that suburban zip code smugness, the kind of tone that expects people to apologize just for owning work boots. "I'm here on official HOA business." I didn't flinch. Uncle Pete always said never let a banker or a bureaucrat see you blink. "Morning, Vivian," I said slowly, leaning against the fence post. "What brings Pineview royalty to cow country? Short on kombucha." Her smile twitched, but she didn't bite. She handed me a manila folder like she was serving a subpoena on live television. "Your property is in violation of multiple HOA codes and ordinances. You have 1 hour to begin removing all non-compliant structures." I opened it. I shouldn't have. I should have told her to get off my land first. But curiosity is a hell of a drug. Inside were maps, official-looking ones, with fresh signatures and the county seal. Only problem? The boundary lines were redrawn, and they now looped in my ranch. "Excuse me," I said, flipping the pages. "This is a mistake. My land isn't in your HOA. Never has been. You're looking at forged documents, ma'am." But Vivian wasn't fazed. Her smile widened. "Oh, but it is now," she said sweetly. "You see, I have connections at the county. Some historical discrepancies were clarified. A generous donation helped expedite the review." Just like that, she said it out loud. On my porch, wearing $500 heels and wielding paperwork like a sword. You ever been so mad your fingers go cold? That's what happened. I could feel my pulse in my teeth, but my voice stayed calm. "You bribed someone to redraw property lines and now you're threatening me with fake violations?" Vivian just chuckled. "Strategic investments, Mr. Caldwell. That barn," she pointed like she was choosing a tile color, "is an eyesore. The cattle pens are unsanitary, and your workshop is unapproved. All of it needs to go." Derek handed me another document, but tripped over a garden hose in the process. Nearly face-planted into my petunias. "Watch it, Con O.T., Vivian hissed. The words didn't register immediately, but the tone did. Mean, sharp, like she'd said it before. And in that moment, something snapped. Not just in me, but in the whole air. This wasn't just about property. This was a power play. A woman in a white car using political favors to steal what 3 generations of my family built. For what? So she could put up another condo complex named after a tree they'd bulldozed? I asked her if this was about Apex developers. Her eyes sparkled like I'd hit a nerve. "They're interested in this land," she said. You could walk away with enough money to start over. Somewhere more appropriate for someone of your background. I didn't need a translator for that part. I called Lucas, best friend since high school, former bass player, part-time barista, and full-time bulldog when someone messes with people he cares about. He showed up in 10 minutes, hair messy, apron still on, phone in hand. He read the papers and said what I was thinking. This is fake, sloppy, crayon-forged garbage. He didn't stop there. Pulled up texts from his mom's friend who works the same cafe Apex execs get their oat lattes. Turns out, they'd been talking loudly, on purpose probably, about their plans to turn Pineview Heights into the new Beverly Hills. My land? Right in the center. And then boom, water. We heard it before we saw it. A geyser, erupting from my irrigation pipe like Old Faithful got mad. My alfalfa crop, half a season's work, drowning in minutes. And who was standing nearby with her phone out, snapping photos like she was at a brunch buffet? Vivian Holt, in a hazmat suit. She had the gall to say, "This is an environmental hazard. The county will need to investigate. Could take months." And I swear she smiled. Lucas spotted tool marks on the pipe housing. Sabotage. Intentional. Her gloves still had dirt on them. She was framing me. Derek returned with another violation notice. Said I had 48 hours to vacate due to the spill. I asked him one question, "You know about Apex?" And he went pale, stammered, fled like a kid skipping detention. That night, Margaret, HOA treasurer, slid into my kitchen like a ghost with a gift. Bank statements. Vivian had been taking monthly payments from Apex. "Your land's not in the HOA," she whispered. I checked the county site. She's bluffing. And that was it. The switch flipped. The line was crossed. You come for a man's land, you better be right. You destroy his crops, threaten his home, and forge his uncle's legacy into a profit margin? You'd better pray he doesn't fight back. I sat down at my table, stared at the old photo of Uncle Pete over the fireplace, and whispered, "They want war? They got it." Vivian gave me 1 hour to tear it down. She had no idea I'd spend that hour tripling her rent. Because what she forgot, what all tyrants forget, is this: you don't corner a rancher on his own dirt. Not without bleeding. It started with a busted irrigation pipe and a lie. It grew into sabotage, forged documents, and whispered deals over espresso in some boutique cafe where men in loafers plotted to erase me off the map like a typo. But what really turned this whole thing into war? It was the moment I realized Vivian Holt didn't just want my land. She wanted me humiliated, broken, erased. Like my Uncle Pete had never dug fence posts with his bare hands. Like I hadn't buried 2 generations of work under my boots every damn day. After Margaret slipped me those bank statements showing payments from Apex developers into Vivian's personal account, the air shifted. There was clarity in it, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table with Lucas and Maggie, the treasurer turned co-conspirator, and I made coffee strong enough to wake the dead. We spread out every scrap of evidence like generals plotting a siege. Vivian had lied. She'd bribed. She'd redrawn county lines. And somehow, someway, she'd convinced a whole HOA board to either go along with it or look the other way. And still, they had the audacity to act like I was the one breaking rules. Lucas was pacing. "She's got half the county office in her pocket. You can't outlawyer someone like that," he muttered. "But you can outsmart her," I replied, and that shut him up, because I wasn't going to court with paperwork. I was going to war with proof, cameras, and a plan bold enough to make the devil blush. And here's the thing most people forget when they build empires on lies. Paper burns. But film? Film lives. The next morning, I drove out to the feed store like nothing had happened. Bought 2 bags of corn, some hardware, and a new trail cam, the kind used by hunters who don't trust fences. Then I took a little detour. You see, Uncle Pete had this old safe built into the barn floor. I hadn't touched it since he passed. But now I had a reason. Under those rusted hinges was a stack of papers from the 70s, surveyor maps, land deeds, and one beautifully typed contract between the Caldwell family and the original developer of Pineview Heights. Turns out, The only legal access road into the subdivision passed through our land. And guess what? It was ours. Paid for, maintained by us, and rented out for a grand total of $50 a month. The key was a clause buried halfway through the document. Something about a rent adjustment trigger in the event of significant infrastructural development. That was my hammer. If Apex wanted to triple the number of homes out here, that clause let me triple the rent. Or revoke the easement entirely. I could cut off their only access and force the whole subdivision to take a detour so long, folks would have to pack a lunch just to get home. But I wasn't done. Not even close. That afternoon, Lucas helped me rig up 3 cameras around the property. Hidden. Motion triggered. One pointed at the front gate. One by the irrigation control panel. And one inside the barn. Because Vivian wasn't the kind of snake who slithered away quietly. She'd strike again. And when she did, I wanted her fangs on tape. I didn't have to wait long. That night, Derek called. Voice shaky, like he'd finally realized he was working for a monster. "Mr. Caldwell," he whispered. I think you should know. She's planning something tonight. Says you're hiding hazardous waste near the cattle barn. She's gonna plant something. A barrel or bag or whatever with fake labels. Call the EPA herself. It's bad. I didn't panic. I didn't yell. I just said, "Thank you, son," and hung up. Then I loaded my shotgun, made a thermos of coffee, and pulled a folding chair out to the barn. I waited in silence, watching shadows crawl across the pasture under a sky full of stars. And sure enough, at 2:43 a.m. headlights, a black SUV idled by the gate. 2 figures stepped out. One was short, hunched. The other walked like they owned the place. Vivian Holt. She came through the gate with bolt cutters. She didn't even flinch at the no trespassing sign. The guy with her, probably a contractor or some poor sap she paid under the table, was hauling a blue barrel with a hazmat label on it. They wheeled it right up to the barn, popped the latch, and rolled it in next to the hay bales. She took photos, documented everything. Then they disappeared into the night like ghosts. By sunrise, I had the footage backed up 3 ways: hard drive, USB, cloud. Lucas edited a cut with a timestamp overlay and labeled it Attempted Framing Exhibit A. And just like that, the game changed. I didn't go to the police. Not yet. I went to the community. Pineview Heights had a message board, one of those fancy digital kiosks outside their rec center. I uploaded a still frame from the video. No caption. Just the image of Vivian in a tracksuit, sneaking around my barn with a hazmat barrel. Beneath it, I printed a line. Ask your HOA president what she was doing at 2:43 a.m. on Caldwell Ranch. By noon, the HOA Facebook group was melting down. Posts, comments, private messages, rumors, and then came the phone calls. Homeowners, board members, even the retired dentist from Lot 7 who used to shout at me over fence height. Vivian's empire had cracks. And now everyone could see them. But she wasn't finished. That evening, a tow truck showed up unannounced. Big rig, loud engine. Said he was there to collect non-compliant equipment. Claimed he had orders to seize my uncle's tractor as part of a lien enforcement. I stood in front of that tractor with my arms crossed and didn't move. "You touch this machine," I told the driver. "You'll need a team of lawyers and a resurrection spell, 'cause I'll bury you and your clipboard in the same ditch." He left. I filed a restraining order the next morning. By then, Maggie had gone full librarian detective. She was digging into county records, cross-referencing signatures, even calling in favors from a cousin who worked in zoning. What she found was gold. The surveyor who signed Vivian's forged map, fired 5 years ago for ethics violations. His license had been revoked in 3 states. And guess who pushed for his hiring in the first place? Apex. It was all unraveling. Vivian showed up at my gate one last time, this time with her lawyer, Steinberg, the kind of man who'd sue a nun for jaywalking. He tried to bluff, said I had 72 hours to vacate due to accumulated environmental violations. I handed him a copy of the easement adjustment. The road through my land now rents at $3,000 a month, starting today. He blinked. "You can't just—" "I can," I said. And I did. I watched Vivian's face change, like a mask slipping. Behind the pearls and Botox was a woman who realized she'd finally gone too far. Her empire wasn't built on rules. It was built on people being too scared, too polite, too busy to fight back. But I wasn't any of those things. I was a rancher. I was Uncle Pete's legacy. And I was just getting started. The night before our final move, the ranch was quieter than usual. Even the cows seemed to sense something was coming. Buttercup barely stirred in her pen, and the barn cats didn't fight over the feed like they normally would. I sat on the porch staring at the stars, remembering how Uncle Pete used to say, "The sky always tells you what kind of man you are." That night, the sky was still, clear, waiting. I wasn't the same man who'd picked up a violation notice a few days ago. I was a man who'd been pushed to the edge of his land, his legacy, and decided not to back down. And tomorrow, I was going to make sure Vivian Holt never threatened another neighbor again. It started with Derek. Poor kid had been Vivian's errand boy, but after what he'd seen and done, he couldn't keep pretending. The look in his eyes during our last call told me everything I needed to know. He was ready to switch sides. He didn't want a payout. He didn't want revenge. He just wanted to stop living like a pawn. "She's planning to meet with Apex tomorrow," he said. "They think you're folding." Vivian's been telling them the land's already theirs. They're drafting press releases. That was perfect, because I was drafting something else. A trap. Lucas spent all night converting my tack room into a recording den. We planted mics under the table, hid a wide-angle camera in the old horseshoe plaque on the wall, and double-checked our state's one-party consent laws. The next morning, we brewed a pot of coffee strong enough to stun a preacher, and waited. Vivian arrived just before 9 o'clock, punctual like always, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my month's feed bill. She walked in like she owned the place. I kept my shoulders slumped and my eyes tired. Lucas was already seated at the table, pretending to read over fake settlement documents. Maggie stood by the barn window, arms crossed, neutral as a judge. Well, Vivian smiled, taking the seat across from me. "You've finally come to your senses." I didn't respond. I just nodded like a man beaten by bureaucracy. She opened a leather folder, pulled out 3 pages, and started explaining her terms. Something about generous compensation and expedited demolition. But it was all theater. She wanted to see me submit. What she didn't know was that every word out of her mouth was being recorded from 3 angles and synced to a backup server in Lucas's apartment downtown. "Before we continue," I said, voice cracking a little for effect, "can you just tell me why? I mean, this land's been here for decades. What did I ever do to you?" That's when she slipped. Vivian tilted her head, as if trying to decide whether I was truly broken or just dumb. And then she laughed, low and sharp, like the sound a hawk makes before it dives. "You didn't do anything, Mr. Caldwell. That's the point. You stayed still while the world moved on. This place, your barn, your cows. It's all in the way now. Apex is building the future. You're just sentimental debris." I felt the heat rise in my chest, but I kept my hands still. Lucas didn't even blink. Maggie turned just slightly, catching Vivian's reflection in the window. "And the forged documents?" I asked. "The bribed inspector? The environmental violations you staged?" She waved it all off like dust on her sleeve. "Necessary evils. Tom owed me favors. And county clerks are cheap these days. A campaign contribution here, a golf outing there, nothing unusual. You think Paradise Valley was built by hugging trees?" Then she looked me straight in the eye. "You should be thanking me, really. That road easement you're clinging to is about to be worthless. The HOA sold the surrounding parcels this morning. You'll be landlocked." That was her final card, or so she thought. She stood up, smoothing her skirt, and pulled her phone from her purse. "Steinberg's drawing up the final paperwork. We'll need your signature before noon." "One last thing," I said, placing my phone face up on the table. "You mind repeating all that for the record?" Vivian froze. Her eyes flicked from my phone to the wall, to the plaque, and then to Maggie. "You recorded this?" Her voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Lucas tapped his own phone. "This is a one-party consent state, ma'am. You knew you were meeting with the property owner. That's the party. She lunged for my phone, but I snatched it off the table. Maggie stepped between us. You threatened to destroy this man's legacy, Vivian. You admitted bribery, forgery, and malicious intent on camera. You buried yourself. Vivian's hands shook, but her face stayed composed. This won't hold up. My lawyer will have it tossed out before lunch. But she was bluffing now. Desperate. Lucas grinned. You might want to call him soon. I hear he's dropping clients with ethics issues. And Apex? They've already issued a statement distancing themselves from any improprieties on your end. That was true. Maggie had leaked the video of Vivian sneaking into my barn the night before and planted it on 3 HOA Facebook pages. Within hours, it had spread to a real estate watchdog site and caught the attention of a local journalist. By the time we sat down at the table that morning, Vivian was already trending. Derek stepped forward from the shadows. He'd been standing near the door the whole time, just out of sight. I sent the Apex board copies of the payments, he said softly, and your private emails. They're done with you. She turned on him with a venom I hadn't seen before. You little traitor. You'll regret this. You'll never work again. I'd rather shovel manure for a decade than carry your purse one more day, he replied. And just like that, the spell broke. She stormed out, high heels clicking like gunfire across the porch. We let her go. We didn't need her anymore. We had the truth, and now so did the community. An emergency HOA meeting was called that evening. Maggie, Lucas, and I sat in the back row while the remaining board members, finally free of Vivian's chokehold, reviewed everything. The video, the bank statements, the forged survey. They voided every deal she'd made, reinstated my easement with the new $3,000 rent, and issued a motion to file criminal charges for fraud and embezzlement. As the motion passed, I looked down at my hands. They were calloused, scarred, honest. They dug trenches, fixed fences, birthed calves, and now they'd helped protect 3 generations of work. Outside, Derek waited by his beat-up car. I walked over and handed him a pair of leather gloves. You ever drive a tractor? He smiled. Not since my dad's place in Wisconsin. Then you're hired, I said. We've got fences to mend and cows to feed. You up for it? He nodded, tears in his eyes. More than you know. That night, the wind moved gently through the trees, as if whispering that the land remembered. It always does. And I sat on that porch again, one hand on my old hound's head, the other holding a cup of black coffee, thinking about Uncle Pete. I whispered, "We're still here, old man, and we're not done. Not by a long shot." 3 days after Vivian Holt was voted out of the HOA and paraded out of Pineview Heights in a scandal hotter than a July brush fire, you'd think peace would have returned to Caldwell Ranch. But that's not how the world works. Not when you've embarrassed rich people in public and made powerful developers lose money. It was the quiet that tipped me off first. Not the peaceful kind, but the heavy, waiting kind. The air didn't hum like it used to, and Buttercup started pacing the fence line like she smelled a storm. I've learned to trust animals more than politicians, and she was right. The first sign came on a Tuesday. Lucas and I were re-graveling the front drive when we saw 3 trucks roll by, identical white, unmarked. The kind of vehicles that reeked of corporate security. Not local boys either. These were men with buzz cuts, tactical sunglasses, and matching boots. They didn't wave. They didn't smile. They just slowed down at my gate, took a good long look, and kept going. Developers aren't done, Lucas muttered, leaning on his shovel. They're just using different weapons now. Maggie was already 10 steps ahead. She'd been digging through Apex's latest land acquisition filings and zoning requests. What she found made my blood run cold. A new document filed with the county-listed public utility upgrades along the eastern edge of my property. Except that land wasn't theirs. It was mine. They were trying to sneak in easements, carve slivers off the ranch like termites on old wood. It wasn't a full assault. It was a siege. Death by paperwork. The next morning, I found orange stakes hammered into the ground by my eastern pasture. Neon tape flapping in the wind, each one labeled Preliminary Access, Phase 2. I pulled every single one out, drove to the county zoning office, and slammed them on the desk of a man named Mr. Gibbons, who smelled like peppermints and hadn't shaved since Reagan. He gave me the bureaucratic shrug, the one they must teach in government training. According to Apex's application, this was submitted with your consent. My what? Your digital signature. Submitted 2 weeks ago. I leaned in, low and quiet. You ever seen a rancher sign something digital, Gibbons? You think I do zoning on an iPad while bottle-feeding calves? He blinked. I walked out with a copy of the document, and Derek confirmed it. Forged. The same pattern. Same document format. They were getting desperate. And that's when it clicked. Vivian might have been the face of the scheme, but she wasn't the brain. She was just the pawn Apex was willing to sacrifice. The real power? Still behind the curtain. Lucas started digging into the ownership structure of Apex, and what he found was murky as swamp water. Shell companies, front organizations, overseas holdings. But one name kept surfacing: Wesley Grant. Former mayoral candidate, failed casino developer, and current consultant for half the real estate schemes in the Tri-County area. Grant wasn't subtle. He was loud, wealthy, and as crooked as a fence built in a windstorm. I knew the only way to beat a man like that wasn't in court. It was on his turf. So I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I put on a blazer, polished my boots, and walked into a chamber of commerce meeting like I owned the place. Every good old boy in the county was there: bankers, builders, lawyers who could draft a tax shelter in their sleep. I spotted Grant near the buffet table, holding court over a group of realtors and talking like he invented asphalt. He didn't recognize me at first. Not until I said, "Heard you're trespassing with paperwork these days, Wesley." The smile dropped half an inch. "Mr. Caldwell," he drawled, "didn't expect to see you out of your barn. Didn't expect to find your boots in my soil," I replied. "But here we are." We moved to the corner of the room, just out of earshot. He leaned in, voice oily as bacon grease. "Look, Ethan, you've made your little stand. You embarrassed Vivian. You've got your YouTube video and your small-town fan club. But this land's gonna change. You can either profit from it or get plowed under. That's how this game works." I didn't flinch. "It's not a game. It's my family's land. My uncle's bones are buried here. I'm not for sale." He chuckled, low and slow. "Everyone's for sale. You just haven't been offered the right price." I walked away. Didn't yell. Didn't threaten. Just looked him square in the eye and said, "You made a mistake thinking I was the same kind of man you buy." That night, someone cut the barbed wire fence along the north side. Let the cattle wander. We spent hours corralling them back by flashlight. Buttercup limped for days. One of the calves went missing, found 2 days later stuck in a drainage ditch. No one claimed responsibility, of course, but we knew. It wasn't random. It was a warning. So we pushed back. Maggie called in a friend from the Department of Agriculture. They ran soil tests, inspected the pasture, confirmed the damage from the water sabotage. That gave us legal grounds to file a civil suit. But we didn't stop there. Derek, now working full-time at the ranch, contacted a whistleblower hotline. Turns out, Apex was already under quiet investigation for a shady condo development near the river. Our evidence helped connect the dots. And the best part? The journalist who'd picked up Vivian's story was hungry for more. He came out to the ranch, wore the wrong boots, stepped in cow patties, and smiled the whole time. "You're David in a world full of Goliaths," he said, snapping photos of the barn. "Middle America's gonna eat this up." I didn't care about fame. I cared about justice, about putting fear back in the hearts of people who'd never faced consequences. Within a week, the story blew up. Headlines ran, "Developer accused of forging signatures, sabotaging ranch." The footage of Vivian sneaking around the barn went national. Wesley Grant tried to deny involvement, but the paper trail burned like gasoline. HOA members held emergency votes across 3 neighborhoods. For board members resigned. Apex stocks dipped 12%. The final nail came when the county zoning board, under pressure from state auditors, officially voided all pending utility permits tied to Apex's Phase 2. My land? protected. My easement? Legally reinstated and recognized at the full rental rate. And just like that, the siege ended. But I'll tell you something most folks don't understand. Winning doesn't feel like a parade. It feels like waking up to silence and not flinching. It feels like watching the sunrise from the same porch your grandfather built and knowing no one's coming to take it from you today. That morning, Lucas handed me a cold beer, grinning like a possum in a cornfield. "What now?" he asked. I looked out over the pasture, at Buttercup chewing peacefully and Derek fixing the gate post. "Now," I said, "now we rebuild. Stronger, louder, and with one hell of a no trespassing sign. Because out here we don't forget. We remember every storm, every lie, every man who ever thought he could take what wasn't his. And we wait, quiet, ready." I woke up before the rooster crowed that morning, not out of habit, but because something in me felt different. Not lighter, no, that would be too easy, but grounded, rooted deeper than ever. The kind of feeling you get when you've weathered the last storm and, for the first time in a long while, you realize there's no thunder behind you. Just sky, still blue wide. I sat at the edge of the bed, boots still muddy from the day before, and took it all in. The quiet hum of the land, the smell of hay and old wood, the soft creak of the floorboards Uncle Pete used to walk barefoot after his knees gave out. The fight was over. Not because they gave up, but because we held the line long enough for the truth to outlive their lies. It wasn't just about me anymore. Wasn't just about saving one ranch from some HOA queen and her corporate puppeteer. Something bigger had happened out here. Something I didn't plan but couldn't ignore. Neighbors started stopping by, not just to gossip, but to ask real questions. They wanted to know how I pushed back, how I got the evidence, how I didn't get buried under legal fees. Men my age who'd been slowly backed into corners for years, by zoning boards, by tax hikes, by developers who smiled while mapping out the end of everything we ever worked for. I remember Jim Powell, used to be a hog farmer before the land taxes ate his savings, came by with a six-pack and a folder full of property maps. "I never fought him," he said, voice trembling. "Thought it'd be easier to just sell. But after what you did? Hell, I think I want my land back." That's when I knew what had to come next. I didn't want a crusade. I'm not a politician. I don't own a suit that fits. But I've got something they can't buy. Dirt under my fingernails and people who remember when a handshake meant something. So we started something small. A gathering. Just folks around here. One Sunday after church, we cleared out the equipment shed, laid out folding chairs, made a pot of stew the way Uncle Pete used to like it. Chunky, spicy, unapologetic, and we started talking. I called it the Landman's Circle. Not a club. Not a movement. Just a place where people who still believed in honest land and honest work could share tools, knowledge, support. Maggie printed out pamphlets on zoning appeals. Lucas made a damn website. Derek drew up a logo, a boot print inside a barbed wire ring. We didn't charge dues. We just asked one question. Are you ready to hold your ground? Word spread faster than I expected. 3 counties in, then 5. Within 2 months, we had ranchers, old mill workers, even retirees with nothing but a backyard garden showing up asking how they could fight back against forced annexations and HOA intimidation. And let me tell you something you won't read in any business journal. These folks weren't angry because they lost money. They were angry because they lost dignity. Because someone looked at what they built, called it outdated, and tried to bulldoze it into progress with a press release and a demolition permit. Grant disappeared after the Apex scandal broke wide open. Rumor was he flew down to Texas to regroup with some investors. But even without him, the machine kept moving. New names, new suits, same game. That's why we didn't stop. That's why we kept building. One afternoon, I got a letter from a lawyer named Richardson out in Buchanan County. His client, a 76-year-old widow named Ruth, was being threatened with foreclosure because her flower beds were not in alignment with community aesthetic. Sounded ridiculous until I saw the fine print. The HOA bylaws had changed 6 months prior, and no one notified her. A loophole. A trap. We got on a Zoom call, the first I'd ever done, thanks to Lucas shoving an iPad in my hands like it was a branding iron. And I sat across that screen with my hat on and told the board flat out, You find this woman for daisies and you'll find your names trending with words like elder abuse and property manipulation. They dropped the fine. She kept her garden. And she sent me a photo of her in front of her tulips holding up a sign that said, "Still blooming." That one damn picture lit a fire across a dozen communities. HOA watchdog blogs picked it up. Then regional news. Then national. And suddenly I was getting invitations to speak. At town halls, agriculture expos, even a conservative radio show that played my story like it was gospel. I kept telling them I wasn't a hero. I was just too damn stubborn to move. But the best thing that came out of all this? Kids started showing up. Young ones. Sons and grandsons of men like us who never thought the land could still be theirs. A boy named Kenny, 19 years old, drove all the way from Arkansas in a rusted-out Chevy just to shake my hand. Said he was about to give up his family plot because no one taught him how to hold on to it. I gave him a job. Gave him Buttercup's stall to sleep in till we cleared the spare room. And now every morning he's the first one out, feeding calves before I even put on coffee. He listens, learns, doesn't complain. That's how I know the fight was worth it. Vivian, last I heard she moved to Arizona. Bought a little condo in some master-planned retirement hellscape where the HOA requires matching curtains. Let her have it. That world was never mine, never Uncle Pete's. We were cut from tougher cloth. I still get letters from folks saying thank you. I read every one. I keep them in a box next to the old saddle Pete used to ride when he was still strong enough to break horses. Some of the letters are from veterans. Some from single moms trying to protect their little garden plots. Some from old men like me, tired of being polite while getting pushed off their land. And when I sit out on the porch now, sun dipping low over the pasture, boots dusty, dog at my feet, I don't just see fences and cows and fields. I see battle lines. I see victory. I see legacy. Because we didn't just save this ranch. We reminded a whole damn country that the dirt under our feet means something. That the old ways of doing right, standing firm, and calling a lie what it is aren't gone. They're just quiet, waiting. And when the next fight comes, we'll be ready. Hell, we're already here.